Sit back and listen to this extremely interesting story. Chapter 5. Sandy returns from a trip. Sandy's ride pulled into the driveway at about 2 in the afternoon. Alex hurried out to help her with her suitcase. Sandy got out of the car wearing one of her business suits and holding the jacket over her arm. She handed Alex the jacket as he pulled the handle out on her luggage. "Can you take this? It was too warm to wear it once I got on the plane," she said. Sandy reached into the back seat for her briefcase and handbag. She closed the car door and waved to the driver as he pulled away. Alex was dressed in his regular Sunday attire, shorts, sandals, and a bright short-sleeve shirt. He moved Sandy's things into the house and went back out to the patio, where he had left a large bourbon and Coke. He had the portable television on the patio table and was watching a baseball game. Sandy went up to her bedroom to change. A few minutes later, she walked out onto the patio wearing a knee-length, breezy-looking sundress. She had fixed herself a margarita and sat down on one of the patio chairs. "Looks like you have been living the carefree bachelor life while I was away," Sandy said. "Oh no." Alex replied, "I've been running errands, laundry, dishes, and we've got salmon marinating in the fridge. We are ready for the night, and all you have to do is relax and look attractive. Dad will take care of it," he said. Sandy sipped on her drink and thought about how she was going to handle telling her husband about John, or if she was going to just keep it to herself. She was really turned on about the beautiful wife idea, but wasn't sure Alex would go for it. The interaction she had with John was new and exciting to her, like the excitement you feel after the first kiss with a new lover. It made her feel young and free, and she didn't want to give up that feeling of excitement she hadn't felt in so long. "I am taking Monday off from work just to recoup from the audit," Sandy stated. "I wish I could take it off with you, but I have a big project and a lot of pressure right now to get it completed," Alex said. Sandy went into the house and opened the laptop. She wanted to read a few of the hot wife advice blogs that she had found on the web. Some of the stuff she had read was way too far-fetched, while other things seemed to be more probable. Sandy read a blog by a woman who said she first realized her husband was open to her having other men when they were alone. She mentioned that someone had shown interest in her, and her husband became even more worried as she gave more details. Sandy thought it was similar to Alex's reaction when they talked about men checking her out or showing attention to her. Alex was starting the grill, and Sandy went out front to water her plants. She noticed Steve the neighbor was washing his car in the driveway across the street. Steve's wife Linda must have been working or shopping. His wife Linda manages a department store and is often gone. Sandy waved at Steve, and he smiled and waved back as Sandy pulled the garden hose out to the front of the yard, where she had a rock and flower garden along the sidewalk. Sandy started misting the plants and noticed that the neighbor had gone in. A minute later, she noticed the curtains covering the full-length windows in the front of Steve's house had opened. The sun was behind Sandy as she watered her plants and shining into the living room of his house through the large windows. Then she saw the neighbor walk into the living room. He was acting like he didn't know that she could see him. Sandy watched him as he unbuttoned his shirt and slowly took it off. Sandy had noticed him before walking around the house with the curtain open, but never thought much of it. "So he likes putting on a show. I wonder how far he will go with a little encouragement," she whispered to herself. Sandy adjusted the hose nozzle to a fine mist, lifted her sundress slightly, and rinsed her legs with the hose. Her bronze-tanned legs glistened from the water. She watched through the sunglasses as the neighbor unbuttoned and unbuttoned the front of his shorts. She could see the tan in some places. Sandy put the hose away and returned to the backyard where Alex was taking the salmon off of the grill. After dinner, Sandy returned to the computer and Alex finished watching his baseball game. When the game was over, he turned off the television and asked Sandy, "Are you coming to bed? I need to wake up early and get to the office. Anyway, I'm going to bed. See you when you get there." Sandy replied, "I'm going to take a shower and then I'll join you." Sandy shut down the computer and went upstairs. She took out a large towel from the linen closet and reached into the shower to adjust the water temperature. She unbuttoned her sundress and let it fall to the floor. She posed in front of a full-length mirror and thought about the effect she has on men. Then Sandy turned and looked at her small but beautiful figure. She felt her smooth baby skin, she thought. Sandy took a shower and straightened herself up. After she finished her shower, she went to her bedroom in a short white robe. Sandy changed into a t-shirt before climbing into bed. She hugged Alex and kissed his shoulder. "Did you miss your baby? It feels good to be back in my own bed," she said. Sandy let her hand slide up the man's back and down his stomach. She didn't sense any excitement in him. "I'm glad to have you home to Sandy. I really missed you," he said as he rolled onto his side and kissed Sandy on the lips. "You know that guy in the pool I told you about, the one that was bothering me? I couldn't believe how brave that man was," said Sandy. Sandy placed her hand on Alex's shorts, trying to catch any reaction from him. Alex said, "Didn't you tell me that he had checked out of the motel the next morning, and you didn't have any more trouble with him? Putting out the do not disturb sign was the best thing you could do." Sandy still didn't notice any arousal, so she continued, "Well, I didn't tell you the details of what he did to me in the pool. Like I said, at first he seemed really nice and just wanted to talk to someone. Then he started buying me drinks, and after a couple of margaritas, I thought I would get away from him by going for a swim. Well, he followed me into the pool and got me trapped into a corner where my feet couldn't touch the bottom of the pool, and he got so close to me that I couldn't tread water." After a slight pause, she continued, "So I had no choice but to put my hands on his shoulders to keep above water." Sandy noticed small signs of agitation in the man. "What happened then? Didn't you tell me he tried to kiss you?" Alex asked in an uneven voice. Sandy still didn't notice a positive response, so she went on with her story. "Well, I didn't tell you everything because I didn't want you to be worried about me being out of town and all." Alex put a hand on Sandy and said, "It's okay, baby. Tell me what's wrong. I can handle it." Sandy decided to tell him more, so she went on. "Well, he wrapped his arms around me so I couldn't get away and pulled me up close to him. That's when he started kissing me on the mouth. I was so scared, and it happened so fast, all I could do was try to figure a way out of this." She paused for a moment and continued, "The next thing I knew, he was kissing me and his hand was touching me. I tried to push him away, but he was too strong for me. Then I felt that he was teasing me." Sandy could feel Alex getting harder as she told her story. Alex was angry that someone was trying to hurt his sweet little wife, but he couldn't help but feel a thrill at the thought of another man touching her. "So what did you then? You got away from him and made it back to your room and called me," Alex said. Sandy noticed that Alex was starting to lose interest, so she continued, "Well, I decided that the only way out of this was to play along like I wanted to. So I raised my legs up and wrapped them around his waist so he could get a better feel, and I started kissing him back. Then I told him that we shouldn't be doing this in a public area, and that I would meet him in his room later. That worked and he let me go, so that's when I went back to my room and called you." Sandy smiled that her story now had Alex as hard as polished sausage. She could see Alex's excitement, but Sandy didn't want him to rush things and leave her unhappy, so she decided she was going to please him and let him sleep. Her plan worked. She pleasured him for a good 3 minutes before he was satisfied. Sandy gave him a good kiss. Alex didn't seem to mind when Sandy kissed him after his pleasure. "I'm really sorry that I let that happen to me, but I really didn't know any other way out of the situation," she said. Alex held her tightly and reassured her that she had done nothing to be ashamed about. "At least you got out of a bad situation before he was able to do anything else to you. I just wish I would have been there to protect you," he said. A few minutes later, Alex fell asleep, and Sandy thought about how he had reacted to her telling him about the stranger. Sandy awoke the next morning before Alex, so she went down to the kitchen and brewed some coffee and cooked breakfast for her loving hubby. After Alex left for the office, Sandy decided to see what kind of mischief she might be able to get into, alone at home for the day. She walked over to the large floor-length window and pulled the curtain wide open to let the morning light shine into the living room. She looked across the street to see that her neighbors, Steve and Linda, were both at home. "I think I better go upstairs and take a shower. After that, I think I'll see if I can find something to wear," she said to herself. Sandy took a relaxing shower and blow-dried her hair. Then she sat down in front of the vanity and proceeded to rub body lotion on her shoulders, arms, and legs. Feeling soft and smooth, she decided to find something to wear to match the sensation. Sandy opened a dresser drawer, picked out one of her prettiest skirts, put it on, and looked at herself in the mirror. She then pulled out a pair of black shoes that she rarely wears because the heels are too high, and they become uncomfortable after a short time wearing them. She looked into the mirror again, turning around to see how she looked from behind. "It's quite beautiful. Maybe I should go out like this," she said. Sandy walked over to the bedroom window to look out across the street. Linda was just backing out of the driveway, but Steve's car was still there. Steve has to travel for his job, so sometimes he's gone for weeks at a time, and other times he's home for a week or two. Sandy remembered reading that spending time with a married man was pretty safe, because they were less likely to get any diseases, and they were less likely to fall in love or be stalked. Sandy noticed that the curtains of the neighbor's house were still drawn. She looked in her closet and found a white sheer blouse with long sleeves. She put it on. It hung down, leaving her gorgeous tanned legs exposed. She buttoned the blouse up, leaving the top 3 buttons undone so that her cleavage was showing. Sandy walked down to the living room and stood in front of the wide open window looking across the street. A few minutes earlier, Steve had looked out of his window and noticed that Sandy's car was in the driveway and her front room curtains were wide open. Sandy watched as the curtains across the street opened, and she could see Steve pretending not to notice her standing there. He was wearing a pair of very short cut-off jeans and a white sleeveless shirt. Sandy watched him as he stood in the window looking at his yard, but she knew she was the main attraction. Sandy pulled the curtains almost all the way closed, but opened enough for her to see out. She knew that Steve couldn't see her looking out now. Steve waited for her to open the curtain back up, but they remained closed. He had a feeling that she wanted to watch a show without giving him the satisfaction of knowing that she was watching. Steve wanted to see her watching, or it wouldn't be as much fun, so he closed his curtain thinking 2 can play this game. Steve had lived across the street from Sandy and Alex for 6 years and had always dreamed of spending time with Sandy. Now he thought Sandy was home alone on the day he was going to try to approach her. Steve said to himself, "Wow, she looked pretty in front of that window this morning. Sandy looks like she needs to have a good time." It was then that he saw Sandy's curtain open, but only halfway. Steve also partially opened the curtain, but he didn't want to stand in front of her so she could see him. Instead, he passed the window several times so she could only catch a quick glimpse of him. Steve was proud of his body and worked out regularly to keep his body toned. He liked to swim and maintained a dark tan. Sandy knew where the curtain game was going and was playing along, so he thinks the lonely housewife wants to watch him, but no show unless I let him see me looking. "Okay, let's play," she said. Sandy pulled the curtain wide open and stood in front of the window again. Steve opened his curtain, and now they both stood in front of each other in plain view. Sandy backed away from the window and sat on the sofa facing the window where Steve could still see her. Steve backed away from his window so that Sandy could not see him anymore because his house was in the shade. The sun was shining into Sandy's window, and she could be seen anywhere in her living room. Sandy got up and stood in front of the window again and waited to see what her neighbor had in mind. Steve was delighted that she loved his teasing game, and now he was standing in front of his window. He reached down and then turned and ran his hands over himself. Sandy watched and enjoyed the show. She knew he was about to show her more. Steve opened the fly of his cut-off jeans and pulled his shirt off. Sandy watched as Steve gave her a show. She thought about Steve and how handsome he was, but being with the next-door neighbor was probably not a good idea. She could see that Steve wasn't going any further and thought that he must be waiting for her to reveal herself to him a little more. Sandy slowly unbuttoned his shirt, starting with the top button and ending with the last button. Her shirt was open now, but she wasn't going to pull it open to expose herself. All Steve could see was a small part of her image. That was enough for Steve to try to impress her some more, and he slowly moved on to his cut-off jeans. Sandy noticed what he was still wearing and also saw his excitement. Now he was watching for Sandy to remove some of her clothes and keep the fun game going, but instead Sandy crossed her arms and tapped the toes of her high heels on the floor. She wanted to send him a message that she expected to see more first. At this point, Steve really wanted to see Sandy in the buff, so he decided to show her what she wanted to see. He slowly got rid of the clothes that remained on him. Sandy saw Steve's excitement and reached for the curtain and closed it. "Show's over, Steve, but you did have nice package," she said. The show piqued Sandy's interest, but she wasn't about to expose herself to this neighbor across the street. Now she had at least something for him. She thought that I might threaten to write to his wife or my husband for being shameless. Sandy felt power over Steve, but she didn't know how she would use it. She thought maybe I should go over there and tell him he'd better be careful about leaving the curtains open, then laughed, "I'm kind of a pretty wife, just teasing." Sandy went upstairs to her bedroom and opened the bottom drawer to her dresser, removing a pair of white shorts. She stepped into her shorts and pulled them up, tucking her blouse in and buttoning up. Sandy looked at her outfit in the mirror and decided that the blouse looked too dressy, so she unbuttoned and took it off. Sandy found a white halter top in her drawer and put in on tying it from behind. She liked wearing white because it showed off her dark bronze tan. She pulled out a pair of high-heeled sandals from her closet and put them on. She looked at herself in the mirror with approval. Sandy returned to the living room, entered the kitchen, and poured a glass or orange juice before walking out to the patio. She opened the umbrella over the patio table and sat down, crossing her legs and looking over the neighbors' backyards. Sandy's cell phone began to vibrate. She looked at the name of the caller and answered the phone. "Hi, John. Missing me already?" John replied, "I do miss you. I can't wait to see you again. Sandy, if you ever want to get away for a weekend, please give me a call. I can save you the trouble of a motel if you are here in Denver." Sandy laughed and said, "Okay, and is that offer open if I bring my husband along?" John replied, "You know that offer is open to you both. I'm sure we would be able to get a little time alone. We could arrange a little golf time for Alex while you and I have a little one-on-one," he said, laughing. "Okay, I'll be looking forward to our vacation in the very near future then," she said. Sandy started thinking about how much fun she had with John while she was in Denver. John said, "By the way, you are going to be seeing me on Thursday. I'm making a trip out your way on business. We're going to be having a meeting to discuss some changes that are going to be taking place at the firm. I was also hoping that you would be able to accompany me at a company dinner on Friday evening. Do you think Alex would be okay with that?" he asked. "I think I can get him to agree. Alex is very understanding when it comes to things that are work-related." "I'll be looking forward to seeing you again, John. Wish you were here right now," she said. When she got off the phone with John, Sandy sighed and thought about how good her time with him had been. She felt a thrill as she remembered the first time he got into a hot tub with her.